First of all, if I've done this right, there should be a link here in an annotation, and I've also stuck it in the description below, to my pregnancy vlog where you can follow the progress of my pregnancy. You may have noticed also that this room is tidier than it is usually, and that is entirely down to Sharada, not to me. Now I could say that my current condition makes it hard for me to tidy, but how many pregnant women are there out there that are just carrying on doing the housework as normal? So I'm not going to say that, I'm going to say it was entirely down to her. I should have done it and I didn't. People like us, the day-to-day, Alan Partridge, Ghostwatch, these are television programs that purport to be documentaries but are in fact fictional, they're dramas. And I like that idea, I'm very keen on it. It doesn't have to be comedy, by the way. I don't think Ghostwatch is really comedy, for example. I think it probably goes for horror. In the 70s and 80s, there was a similar genre in books. An example of that being this, Galactic Aliens. This purports to be an electronic book reproduced in print form, which shows you hazardous aliens throughout the universe. Everything in this video is copyright the respective people. I wasn't very keen on that book. It was published in 1978 because it wasn't very scientifically plausible. This has an excuse for being a physical book. It's Galactic Tours. This is supposed to be a commemorative anniversary edition of the Thomas Cook Company, which is producing book form because it's trying to be retro. So that's quite interesting because it has an excuse for being a book. This one is really interesting. I will go on to other stuff, I'm not just going to show you books. This is Handbook for Space Pioneers, which is about the 8 planets colonised by human beings in the year 2376. And what interests me about it in particular is that it just assumes that everyone will be homeschooled or home educated, as I prefer to put it, without sort of even anyone turning a hair, which I think is really interesting because that didn't happen, did it? And there are others, for example, Tour of the Universe, The Alien World, and it's not confined to science fiction either. You also have things like Amarant, that's about the flora and fauna of Atlantis. It's got barometer ferns in it, actually. I'm not sure if I've showed you a page with that. And also the Dutch book, Gnomes, this one, which is about the sort of natural history of gnomes, talking about, for example, how their sense of smell is better than ours and how they live in little holes in the ground and what their households set up like, things like that. So all of that is really quite impressive. You have things like the Blair Witch Project, and you also have interactive fiction, which are things that set off to create a world in which people collaborate and they act together, like Second Life, for example, Dungeons and Dragons, GURPS. GURPS is really useful from an educational point of view, by the way. I've used it to illustrate stuff about astronomy. So combine the two, and what you have is what is generally called unfiction or alternate reality games. Examples of that on YouTube would be Lonely Girl 15, Kate Modern, and even to some extent Wheezy Waiter, although of course that is a documentary, and he really does have a whale, an alligator, tank and clones. And I've done a lot of this myself as well. For example, on the alternate history wiki, I've got the Caroline era, which is what if the 70s never ended, basically, and I'm going to link to that below as well. And I've got backward and forward, which is the idea that what if things were socially backward but technologically forward. And Here Be Dragons itself is actually, which by the way you can get if you subscribe and ask me. I will send you an ebook version of it, and one person out of up to the 144 subscribers will have a print version of it mailed to them, and some other stuff that I've done as well. I think they have a value from an educational point of view, and obviously they're fun. It's also interesting to explore issues in that way as well. But the question arises, is it ethical? Are you being dishonest to people when you're doing that? I think it's okay if you have high expectations of your audience and those expectations are realistic. If you expect the person to consciously buy into the game and collaborate, and perhaps, you know, add things to it as well, then that's really good. I mean, for example, on YouTube, you could have a channel and you could say, ask questions, and you could develop your world with your audience and your subscribers, and thereby build something up with them, rather than sort of dictating what it is, and I think that would be quite good. The question arises, to what extent people are aware of this kind of thing. There are similar examples in everyday life. It doesn't just consist of interactive fiction, unfiction and so forth. Pretend play with children. Another adult example would be historical reenactment, whose value is obviously enjoyable and educational. You've got things like hypnotherapy perhaps, which could be a role-playing exercise. Lucid dreaming. You have hoaxes, of course, like Sans Serif, the Guardian April Fool's Day hoax. Role-play in training situations where you play the role of a manager or an aggressive customer. I have varying degrees of comfort with that. I can't do roleplay at all as it happens. Another one is fan fiction. The interesting thing about fan fiction is that it is a collaborative world. Some people ban it. For example, Anne McCaffrey banned it. She wouldn't allow fan fiction at all for her stuff. And then you get a more edgy, sort of slightly creepy version of that, which is shipping, where shipping of YouTube people, for example. There's the whole Alex and Charlie thing, which is really disturbing and horrible. I suppose one question you might ask is whether religion is an example, and then taking that away from religion, what about psychotherapy? Are you creating a fantasy world there in the same way? And another example is improv. People walking backwards in central New York City, people doing repetitive actions in a cycle and seeing if anybody notices, and that kind of thing. I wouldn't say it can really be defined. In a way it's manipulative, but I actually think it's quite a positive thing, and I would like to get involved in something like that, particularly on YouTube. Now, if you like this video, please rate, comment and subscribe. Remember my pregnancy vlog, and if you were to look at that, that'd be great. I'm going to be doing it once a week every Thursday, but I'm going to upload the first video today. If you dislike, so tell me why, so that I can improve, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow, and I'll see you today on the pregnancy vlog. Bye!